Well, we've made it to the end of the play.
The end.
The end.
They
die.
both die. Credits.
Maybe we should elaborate.
Huh? We don't need any more than that, do they?
Well, I mean, I've kind of said, all right, we know they're going to die at the end, but it's the how and the why. So let's
Fine. Let's talk about Romeo and Juliet.
Act 5. When we get to Act 5, we know that Shakespeare is bringing us around to the end of our cycle, which needs to end in chaos, and because it's Shakespeare and it's tragedy, lots and lots of death. We talked about, at least in my group, that Act 5 is looking for our story to come to some kind of a reasonable ending. And reasonable does not mean that ethically or morally it makes sense. It just means that in terms of plot and conflict, it's been wrapped up.
Everything makes sense in the order of events, not necessarily like it's a happy ending or the ending that you expected.
Right. So let's break down this last act, which is the shortest with only 3 scenes.
But one really long scene.
Really long. Act 5, Scene 1 begins with Romeo in Mantua, which was his agreed upon destination after he left Verona because he was banished.
And Mantua is the neighboring town, and so he's not too far away, but remember, things take time to get places. So Friar Lawrence, like in the last act, he was sending his note on a donkey to get there. In the play, he gives it to another friar to deliver to Romeo, and he needs to walk there, so he needs some time to do it.
Now, we don't know what has happened to the message from Friar Lawrence. However, whether you are thinking of the movie or the play, somehow Romeo's manservant, Balthazar, sees a dead Juliet being buried in her Capulet tomb and goes and delivers this really sad news to Romeo.
And because he delivers this news to Romeo, Romeo thinks, without the friar's note, that Juliet's actually dead. And so we get a couple of quotes from him in this short scene that starts this act. The first one is, "I dreamt my lady came and found me dead. Strange dream that gives a dead man leave to think." So in this quote, it's him thinking about Juliet before Balthazar gets there. And so he hasn't heard anything about her, and this goes into that kind of...
The foreshadowing. Once Romeo finds out from Balthazar that Juliet is in fact dead, his new plan is to go and be with her. And so, without actually telling Balthazar what he's about to do, Romeo makes a decision in a very quick soliloquy that he will lie with Juliet tonight. But he'd like a little help with that.
This is the I Defy You stars, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I'll put a clip in there somewhere. It's very dramatic.
Yeah.
Then I defy you, stars.
In order to do that, Romeo seeks out the help of an apothecary, which is not the name of a person, but the name of a profession. An apothecary is really just an old-timey pharmacist.
Yeah, but a pharmacist that doesn't know anything about anything.
They have access to a lot of cool drugs, and they think they know what they're doing with them, but really it's just a person with a lot of drugs. And so Romeo seeks out not just any apothecary, but finds the poorest, most miserable one he can find. Very desperate, because
he wants poison, and it's against the law for an apothecary to sell poison to someone. But he wants to find the poorest person to give him money, because Romeo's got a lot of money still, and in order to get the poison from him.
I pay thy poverty and not thy will.
Now, Act 5, Scene 2 is really short, except that it, much like some of other Shakespeare's really short scenes, it packs a punch. It's the first time we see Friar Lawrence actually talking to this second friar, Friar John, and we find out what happened to the message. And it's a little bit interesting that we're reading this scene during this time, isn't it?
Again, too soon with these quarantine jokes, Mrs. Yasui.
Basically, Friar John says, "Hey man, I'm so sorry, the letter is still here with me because I was on my way and I went to go get a travel buddy, and it turns out that they were quarantined in a house that could have had plague, and so I kind of got trapped with them, and nobody would take it from me because I was in a house of quarantine.
So the note doesn't get there. The friar's upset. He says, "Unhappy fortune, by my brotherhood, the letter was not nice, but full of charge, of dear import, and the neglecting it may do much danger." So the friar knows that Romeo might get news that Juliet's dead and then do something stupid. Because remember, Friar Lawrence knows Romeo really well, and he knows how kind of rash his decision-making is. And so he needs to get to Juliet before Romeo. And Juliet,
Well, and it's not just that. He needs to get to Juliet because she's waking up.
and without
And
Romeo
won't be there to get
Yeah.
her. So, regardless of whatever Romeo chooses to do, a young girl is about to wake up in a tomb with nobody there.
And those were the nightmares that Juliet had in Act 4.
Oh, this last scene is really long. But, I am so sad that almost every single film version of Romeo and Juliet does not include this one moment with Paris. Paris, if you remember, he is Juliet's actual betrothed, set up by her parents, but the morning of the wedding, he discovers his bride dead in bed, and dead. And this is a point where we get to know Paris a little bit better, and we realize he's not that bad of a guy.
And now, after the fact that she's dead, he's there with just a servant, and so he's not performing for anybody.
In the middle of the night.
In the middle of the night, as Romeo is kind of hiding in the bushes, trying to get into the Capulet's tomb. And so he sees Paris come in, and we overhear Paris talk about how Juliet is being missed. So he says, "Sweet flower, with flowers thy bridal bed I strew. O woe, thy canopy is dust and stones, which with sweet water nightly I will do, or wanting that with tears distilled by moans, the obsequious that I for thee will keep, nightly shall be to strew thy grave and weep."
And what I find so heartbreaking about this is he's literally alone. He actually sends his servant away so he can do this privately, and isn't just there for one night, but seems to be making a promise that he's going to be coming back nightly and essentially watering these flowers that he's brought for her with his own tears. He's really upset.
And because he's a nice guy, and because he's upset, Romeo ends up killing him. Yeah,
But
he's in the way of Romeo's target.
And it's a real misunderstanding.
So there's death count number 1 in Act 5.
A boy's just been killed.
Is Paris dead outside? And Romeo does take Paris and bring him into the tomb. So Romeo, overhearing this, knows that Paris cares about Juliet and doesn't just leave his body outside. He drags him into the tomb so he could be near Juliet.
It's a really big oopsie daisy. Now, Romeo goes into the tomb, and for anybody who's unfamiliar with the idea of a catacomb or an open tomb, if your family had a lot of money, you would have your own private family tomb. Crypt. And inside this room, it would kind of be creepy. There'd be shelves with bodies placed on it. There might be these big tables that you'd just be laid on top of, and you just slowly decompose there, but you'd be surrounded by your family. And so Juliet is lying there on a table, dead, next to other members of her family, including the freshly dead Tybalt. But Romeo sees her, and there's this sad moment where the audience realizes through Romeo's speech that she looks pretty good for a dead person. Romeo says, "Oh, my love, my wife, death that has sucked the honey of thy breath hath yet no power upon thy beauty. Thou art not conquered. Beauty's ensign yet is crimson in thy lips and in thy cheeks, and death's pale flag has not advanced there." There's color on her face. Dead people are usually very pale.
And again, this is at the end of that potion that the friar has made, so the time is wrapping up for that. So she's waking up, and we, the audience, know she's waking up. That's why she's got color on her cheeks, and there's that crimson in her lips, so her lips aren't blue. They're getting their color back, and so we're getting right to the point where she's about to wake up, but Romeo doesn't know that, and the friar's not here yet. So Romeo, in his grief, leans over, talks to Juliet, expresses his love for her, and then drinks his poison from the apothecary, kisses her one last time, and then we get the kind of famous line, "Thus with a kiss I die." And then,
boom.
Dead.
Number 2.
Death number 2, yes.
That's my son! my boy! My boy!
Is there a reason why you keep showing these Harry Potter clips?
Because I know how upset it makes you.
I just had to watch this last week with Aya. I'm still upset about it.
So he's dead. In the play, we get a short amount of time, and then Friar Lawrence comes in and sees Romeo dead just as Juliet wakes up. The friar comes in, and Friar Lawrence at this point has messed up every single plan that he's made.
Oh, yeah.
And he sees Romeo there dead. Juliet is waking up, or he doesn't know what to do, so he decides maybe the best thing for Juliet is to join a nunnery and just kind of get out of town.
It would essentially make her disappear.
And that would both save Juliet and it would save Friar Lawrence. And so Friar is a bit of a lame character at the moment.
He's very self-serving right now.
And we start to hear guards coming outside. So the night watch has been called by Paris's servant after he sees Romeo fighting Paris and then breaking into the tomb. So the guards are coming, and the friar is trying to get Juliet out, but Juliet won't leave once she sees Romeo dead on the floor. And then the friar just leaves.
He just books it.
Just leaves her there. And so I blame the friar for most of what happens in this play. Because of this scene and him not taking kind of ownership of what he's done.
Right.
And so now we get Juliet seeing Romeo, and then
she becomes just as desperate as Romeo. The second, if you remember, as soon as Romeo thinks that Juliet's dead, his immediate response is, I guess I'm going to die too. Juliet's immediate response is,
poison, I see, hath been his timeless end. Drunk all and left no friendly drop to help me after.
I see that you've drunk poison, and she tries to drink from the bottle. The bottle is empty.
I will kiss thy lips. Haply some poison yet doth hang on them to make me die with a restorative. Thy lips are warm.
So she's doing everything she can to jump on board with Romeo, and another jab at timing makes the comment, thy lips are warm. She just missed him.
Yeah, he was just alive, and his lips are still warm. So we get Juliet now is kind of grief-stricken. People are coming. The watch is coming. So she doesn't have poison, but she does have a dagger. So she takes, I think, Romeo's dagger.
It is.
And then stabs herself. And so she says, another famous line from the play is, here is thy sheath, and then stabs herself with the dagger straight into her heart, and then dies down with Romeo.
No! No!
Come on! Not again!
And so we get the prince with some kind of powerful lines after everyone has figured out what's happened. Off stage, we get another death.
Yeah. So like I said, everybody's convening on stage. We get Lord and Lady Capulet, and then Lord Montague shows up, and they're like, "Hey, dude, where's your wife?" And he goes, she was so sad by our son's banishment, she died of grief this morning.
The people are confused because they see Juliet and she's dead again.
Freshly dead.
And so we get her bleeding to death, and then we get the whole story, what's happened, all the kind of lies and plans come to light, and the prince has a decree for everyone.
He says, you're looking at a pile of death on the stage, but let's be honest about how it ended up here.
See what a scourge is laid upon your hate. That heaven finds means to kill your joys with love. And I, for winking at your discords, to have lost a brace of kinsmen. All are punished. All are punished!
So we get the prince's declaration that everyone's going to be punished, and now Capulet and Montague kind of shake hands and decide to put the feud aside, and each is going to build a golden statue of the other's child in commemoration for everything. And so we get this chaotic nature and this tragedy with some hope for the future that these families have learned from this. And it took a lot for them to learn it.
But we knew that was going to happen from the prologue.
Yeah,
it says not, but the end of their two children's death could resolve. Like, it takes the death of their kids to put an end to this feud.
And so we get this loop back into chaos, and then the kind of ending of the play. There's a lot that happens on Thursday, so we'll put up this little thing here where it goes through everything. We have the deaths marked on this count as well. And so the total death count for the play is 6.
Right.
Because we get the 4 today, 4 all on the last day, and we get Tybalt before that, and then Mercutio before that. So we have 6 dead at the end of this play.
We can make this work. We're Romeo and Juliet.
It didn't work for Romeo and Juliet. That play ends in a tragic double suicide.
That's how it ends? Why do people like it so much?
So we talk about why. Why did we just read this? You get to the end of the story, and it's so weird because here you've got 2 teenagers who meet each other and within hours decide not only that they are in love with each other, but that they are so in love and desperate to be together that they're going to get married, and then just a couple days later die for want of each other. What on earth are we supposed to take away from this? Why do people keep reading Romeo and Juliet over and over and over 400 plus years later?
Why do people like it so much?
In our class, we talked a lot about the difference between love and lust and what that means. And so we get a lot of that discussion of what love truly is in this play. And there's lots of different forms of it. So you've got love or lust between Romeo and Rosalind and Romeo and Juliet. We've got kind of the brotherly love between Benvolio and Mercutio and Romeo. We've got kind of paternal love between Friar Lawrence and Romeo and the nurse and Juliet.
Right.
We've got these lots of different types of love all in one play kind of packed in there. And you see...
And what people will do for it.
Yeah, and you can see the different kind of variations or aspects of how you interact with people. So that's one thing you can take from this play.
Why do people like it so much?
I mean, and another thing is the dangers of holding on to hate, especially when you can't even identify clearly where this is coming from. We have a lot of long-standing feuds in the world, and we can even think about some long-standing feuds that we have going on right now in our country. Think politics. We can't really put our fingers down as to why certain political groups are at such odds with each other. I mean, you could point at values that they have, but even those values seemed to be cast aside or not even thought about in times of great political upheaval.
And so these ancient grudges that they talk about are bringing the new mutiny. So these old hates that nobody can really pinpoint are coming up over and over and over again and causing danger and strife right now.
Right.
And so that's...
To innocent people.
Yeah.
To people who maybe don't even care about these feuds, and yet they can't help but get sucked into them and have to essentially suffer the consequence of feuds that they don't have a part in. And that really sucks.
Why do people like it so much?
In my class, we walked into this with my goal being to talk a lot about gender expectations. What do we expect from young men and women as they're growing up, as they're becoming people? We know that Juliet, as a woman, is just expected to become a wife and a mother. That's her destiny in life. And I don't feel like in 400 years we've moved too far off that point. Especially in a lot of different cultures. There's a lot of expectations for girls to behave one way, and just on the other end, for men and boys to expect to be behaving a certain way. Think of all the violence and the inappropriate conversations and jokes that happen between Romeo and his friends. Who's to say that these lustful feelings that Romeo has been displaying isn't just something that he's expected to do?
And we talked about in my class when we started it with Samson and Gregory's conversation, while it is a very quick conversation that goes into like, I'm going to rape people against the wall.
As a joke,
those conversations where 2 guys are kind of bragging and kind of how they can exploit girls are things that you hear in the hallways in school. And so they're conversations and themes that are kind of ingrained in us as people. And so reading something like Romeo and Juliet can help how people haven't changed in this spread of time, and how we could change for the better, and how people in the play, their decisions could be our decisions in the future. And so we can learn from that.
Right. I mean, we even see a really clear example of Juliet taking charge of her own destiny when she, refuses to marry Paris initially, refuses to take the nurse's advice to leave Romeo behind and try to begin a new life. And while her decision doesn't necessarily end her up in a good place, you are starting to see that people are allowed to change their destiny, to change their fate. It's just you need other people to help you live in a world where, you can be supported with those changes. And Romeo and Juliet weren't in that world yet.
Try to get somebody more intelligent to support you than Friar Lawrence, though.
Oh my God.
All right, so I think that's it.
I could keep talking for days, but I know that we aren't supposed to.
Yeah. So we've kind of shared this with you. We both have assignments coming up, kind of wrapping up Romeo and Juliet, but this is the last of these videos we're going to make. So we'll add a couple things to the end here. So we hope you've enjoyed these, and we will talk to you later. Bye.
For never was there a story of more woe than this of Juliet and her Romeo. And Romeo and Juliet are dead.
It bums me out because I love Friar Lawrence. He's got some awesome speeches.
He does. He's got great speeches. He just isn't the best planner.
It's the follow through.
It's the little details. Yeah. Even though they told you what to expect.
They did. So let's break it down.
Do that again. That's scratching me.
So let's break it down.
Again. Wait till my face is no. Stop. Go ahead.
It's true.
All are punished.